I'm Holly Elissa Bruno, and I'm with,
Denise Rokicki.
and we are two trauma survivors walking each other home. And I'm really happy to be with you, Denise. How you doing? How you looking for? Are
I'm
you looking forward to this?
Yep, I'm doing well.
I'm glad. I was just asking Denise, who's our caterpillar lady. That's actually like calling somebody a cat lady. I didn't mean it that way.
Meow. I am.
Yeah. Denise
I
does
don't
this.
have a cat, right, but I am a cat lady.
I've had cats, I've had dogs, but here's the deal. Denise does this wonderful rehabilitation thing of ensuring that monarch butterflies make it through their full early growth and development stages so they can take off. And now they take off and fly to Mexico, right?
Yep, these are the Mexican ones.
And how do you
I
know
say
who's
adios, amigos.
Adios, amigos? Well, how do you know that they're Mexican ones as opposed to the earlier ones who are where are they going?
Uh, each stage they go through a progression,
Okay.
and by this time of year, they're to the fifth uh, generation of monarchs, and the fifth generation flies to Mexico.
So fifth generation means the fifth of this year of 2024.
Yes.
Okay, so if I were a monarch in the second generation, where would I fly to?
You'd probably be in southern states, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, and then as they migrate north, they breed, lay eggs, fly north. Breed, lay eggs, fly north.
So the guys, so my parents, if I were in the second generation, they would have flown to like North Carolina or something, laid eggs there, and then they flew north. And then do
Usually,
those,
after they lay eggs, they pass away. They die.
oh, so that sounds like trauma.
Yeah.
Okay, my friend. So after checking in on the monarchs, let's just talk about this program. Denise and I have been doing this program for, I don't know, it's less than a year, but we've been working together on this program for 4 years. And we meet each week to share with each other spontaneously what it's like to be a trauma survivor living our everyday lives. And the focus is on hope. The focus is on how we can translate trauma's harsh legacy into healing. And this whole podcast started in 2020, just during the just as the pandemic hit, because my book called "Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You" came out then. And so since then, we've been looking at how on earth we can deal with life's everyday stuff. And as trauma survivors, not get stuck in the past or get stuck in the things that happen with our brains, because our brains have patterns that we can fall into, and how we can consciously choose whenever possible to have a easier way of life than to bring up all of the stuff that's happened before. And Denise always shares with us, going to ask her if she can do it again, where to look up on trauma. What if, for example, if something that you say or I say is triggers somebody, reminds them of their trauma, where could they go online on trauma to find what would help them for a phone
First,
call?
they can drink water,
Drink water.
have a drink of water, and then you can contact warm lines through your Google. You can just say warm lines in Ohio or wherever you are, and the phone number will come up. And warm lines are to help when you're not in a crisis of like suicide or a big crisis. It's when you're in a warm crisis.
So I hear you. So as opposed to a hotline, which is I'm really hot under the collar, I'm having my executive function has decreased to like 5%. I need immediately crisis help. A warm line, if I call trauma warm line, I will find instead a fellow traveler with whom I can talk. And we're suggesting that because there are times that are hard to predict when any one of us can have a flashback or a reminder of what it was like to be in a hard time. So we want you to know you've got that safety factor. And the other thing Denise said was to have water. Sometimes we move around and shake, 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 whatever we got to do to reactivate our strengths. So I want to share today, and it's we're getting toward the end of August, which is sad because I love me some summer. But as I just read, summer doesn't end until the 22nd of September. So keep those pumpkin spice lattes until then. Margaritas and lemonades are now. All right, here's something I've been facing over and over again. And here's what I've learned, Denise, as a trauma survivor. When I keep getting the same challenge, it comes back in my face. I've learned that that's an opportunity to get underneath the fact patterns, get underneath what happens, and get down to what the real underlying dilemma is. So I've had a number of circumstances where I have made a decision, and the decision is kind of a negative one. And it's a quick decision. And maybe it's even a self-defensive decision. And then when I look back in the pattern and I say, oh, this is like the second, the third time I've done a similar thing. And I'll give you an example in a minute so this can make sense and not just sound like theory. But maybe the second or third time that happens, I say, wait a minute, sweetie, I think you're missing an opportunity to grow here. So does that make sense so far?
Yep.
Can you give me an example of how that makes sense to you?
Like we find ourselves in a pattern that is, for example, with friends, that you always give more, or you always are the one that reaches out, or something like that. And then it happens again, and you're like, dang, why does this keep happening to me? Or you could say, why do I keep doing this to myself?
Right. Yeah. So here's my pattern. And it's I think it has to do with my voice and self-expression. And trust me, those are huge in terms of my trauma recovery. Because if I can't claim my voice, it's hard for me to know who I am. And as a traumatized child, I was never encouraged to find my voice. Why? Because I was supposed to simply be, I suppose the cliche is automaton, but I was supposed to simply be a good soldier in an army of people that didn't ask any questions, that did what they were supposed to do, did not rock the boat, and preserved, in my case, the narcissistic patriarchy. So it was a family of mostly women, and the male was the patriarch, and he was a narcissist. So if no one asked me, what do you think about that? Then I wouldn't have thoughts. I wouldn't even know what a thought was, right? And when I went to school in the 1950s, people didn't say, hey, what do you think about that? Or, well, why do you think that goes that way? No, they said, memorize these facts. So I didn't, and I don't ever remember anybody saying to me, and Denise, I know this is true for you too. Did anybody ask you, and how do you feel about that? And I might respond, well, I think, I think, and I say, no, it's not how you think. It's what's going on, how you feel about that. So we have a similar pathways in this issue, right?
Yes.
Because you've talked about what, like being 30 or maybe 40 or something before you've just made a decision to discover what your feelings are.
Right. And pay attention to feelings. Before that, I was required to not have feelings.
Yep. And the payoff for not having feelings was what?
You could belong to the family.
Right. The cost of admission, right? The
Right.
cost of admission to be part of a dysfunctional family was don't talk and don't trust and don't feel. And I've come to see that cost of admission is too high. And yet the consequence of not paying the price anymore is that I have lost a lot of family members. I don't, my primary place of belonging is not my family of origin. And that's hard and that's harsh. So we've talked about that, but what I'm going to talk about today is this. When I find myself in a pattern, like you just said, Denise, that's when I have choices. And that's where I thought we could talk about today. When we find ourselves in patterns, what can we do to heal rather than to repeat? And as I'm identifying this pattern, it's a hard one because it is a pattern of not having had a voice, which means I couldn't express myself, which means I didn't have an identity. I didn't have an identity, and I was terrified of being annihilated because there was such violence in my family. So here I am at 78 and a half. And when challenges come my way, which they have over and over again in the last couple of years, that there's something wrong with my voice, at least that's how I could interpret it. That's when I would need to step back and say, sweetheart, wait. It's not just about defending yourself and saying, yes, I have a right to have a voice, although that's a good thing. It's more than that, asking, where can I express my voice that's appropriate? And is my voice appropriate in all places? And so here's the issue. I have written 6 books, 2 of them in conjunction with other authors. And I was asked to write a book with other authors. And I didn't know any of the other authors. They were all from the same university system. And many of them came to a session I did on people pleasing. And they really got into it and said, we want you to be one of our authors. So I said, oh, sure, because I wasn't writing anything at the time. Well, we've gotten feedback on the book, and the truth, and it looks like it's going to be published, but who needs to change the chapters? It's me. And why is that? Well, I'm trying to look at that. And I believe it's because my style is so different and my approach is so different. The topic is joy. And other people are looking at how can we find joy in our everyday. And I went to one of their workshops, and they're very, how can I say this? It's almost like a literal direct statement. Would you rather be this way or that way? If a teacher asks you, can I have some new resources to create I'd like to create something with my class, and the choice for the supervisor, the director, is we don't have any money, but let's see what we can do. Or the choice is, you know what? Let's look at our options. Or the choice is, no, we just don't have money for that. The joyous one, of course, of those 3 choices is to say, let's look what we can do. We'll figure this out. And why is that joyous? Because it leads to possibility. Why would we don't have money for that not be joyous? Because it would shut down somebody's dream. It's like working with a child. Can you give us an example of when you've worked with a child and a child says, I want to fly to the moon this afternoon. Teacher Denise, can I do that? And what do you say?
Well, how are you going to get there? A balloon, a rocket, a helicopter?
My wings. I'm going to fly on my wings.
Right on. Let's brush them off and make sure they're ready to go.
Can we make some? Because I can't see them. I can't see them. I can't look over my shoulder and see them.
Yeah, I can make some on your arms.
Okay. And can I climb up to the top of the school and jump off and fly?
Let's start by jumping off a chair. See how that goes.
But that won't let me get the wings flapping enough. But I'll try. Okay.
Then I'll say, okay, use your imagination. Your imagination is your best thing you got. Go ahead and use your imagination and fly.
All right. Okay. So now that's awesome. Look, what you just did is a pathway to joy, because joy is the opposite of being restricted and shut down. That's my sense of joy. joy is like unfolding possibilities. Joy is also being seen, being heard, and letting my voice come out, right? So, how would you describe joy?
Joy. Well, like I got a lot of joy out of the convention. And so
Oh, yeah,
I believe that joy is like a potential for, or knowing there's a potential for something good to happen.
it's the possibilities unfolding, and it's also what in the moment.
Wiggliness and goodness,
Loving the way. it's it's hope. I think hope is the
right?
precursor.
Hope, right?
That's, I mean, that's for me. It might be something else to you, but and of course, the convention that Denise is talking about is the Republican convention, right?
Your connection is a
Oh, I
little
thought you said
warbly.
that. I'm sorry. I thought you said you got a lot of joy out of the convention.
I
Can you hear
did,
me? So I
yes.
was joking with you saying you must be talking about the Republican convention.
No, I'm talking about the Democratic National Convention.
Girl. Yeah.
It was
I,
so good.
well, what was one of the most beautiful moments of that?
Uh, the very most favorite thing that made me so incredibly happy was that all the different colors of people are sitting next to each other and wishing for the same thing. That's what I loved.
Oh, I love that. I get that. And my moment of absolute joy, hope turned into the promise fulfilled was when Gus Walls
Ugly
was like,
crying
he was ugly crying and it was beautiful. And
was
that's my dad. It's my dad. I was just in that moment so fully. Here's a guy who's not stopping because he's not supposed to be. What call it ugly crying when it's just plain old crying? But anyway, he was crying, and I thought this is beautiful. And it's only afterwards that people started commenting he's neurodiverse, and I thought, wait a minute, now where are you getting that information?
right,
Because to me, it's totally healthy to
right.
ugly cry, to cry and
Some
say, that's
people
my
were even using the old terminology of learning disabled and, you know, not all there, slow,
right, disordered. Somebody online said
disordered,
disordered,
right?
disordered.
Which he's not. He's different, but he's still equally valuable and he has something to give. And
Mm-hmm.
Gabe was an expression of love and pride and hope also.
God, all of that, that was joy. What I'm neurodiverse and my son is neurodiverse and
I'm
I'm,
neurodiverse. I consider myself neurodiverse. I
that's right.
think mine is abuse stimulated.
Mm-hmm. Mine is, I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which was trauma stimulated. It's the way my brain works under trauma, which is what we're talking about today. But what I haven't seen yet is, and I need to, because sometimes when things are crazy, like in my family, things were crazy, I kept trying to decide what's the truth here? What's the truth here? But when I would say the truth out loud, I would be punished for it. So I learned to keep the truth inside. And that led to one of two things, Denise. Either I really trusted myself inside and you were not going to mess with me, or I didn't know what was real. Because when my father would say things to me like, well, you didn't see that, that didn't happen. Or I would say to the women in my family, we don't have to put up with this, by which I mean the abuse and the incest. And I'm the youngest, and I'm saying we don't have to put up with this. We can, if we all unite, we can take a strong stand. And they literally turned all I remember is the image of them turning their backs to me, like not even being willing to talk about it, which essentially said to me either if I wanted to belong, that I was crazy, there was something wrong with me, and that
Right.
they were fine. Or if I had the strength and confidence at the time, I could say, damn, they're not facing it. But when the need to belong is so strong, that's when my brain can go into neurodivergence and I can fool myself into thinking, well, it must be me. I'm the one that must be making the mistake. And as adults, my two sisters and I are very different about how we see my father. And that has made it really tough for me to say in the beginning, for me to say I'm an incest survivor when they're describing this man as such a
Saint.
saint. Why did you choose the word saint? Because that's typical.
That's how it was in my house too, that he was a saint for marrying a woman with 3 kids already.
And the 3 kids were his supply.
Right.
He knew what he was doing. Yeah. That word saint gets applied to cover up a multitude of sins.
Yep.
When someone's a saint, they're either martyrs, which is the position more women than men, I think, get into, where I don't ask for much. I've got those in my family too. I don't ask for much. But when I've got my heart set on something, you better give it to me. It's like, oh, of course, whatever you want, you go first. But the message is, the person that takes the last cookie is a spinster, or the person that says what she wants will be given the side eye and later on have her comeuppance for having done that. Because girl daughters, trauma survivors, supposed to be needless and wantless. Yeah. So I think what we're doing today is debunking a whole lot of these myths, Denise, about
Right.
what's a saint, what's a martyr, what does the need to belong do to my sense of self? And so here's the deal. I my books my writing is good, or I wouldn't have been written 6 books. And yet the older I get and the stronger I get, the more my true voice comes out. And I think that's a sign of a writer. But I wrote a proposal for it's new leadership, new editors, etc., at one of my publishers. And I always have gotten a really positive response, like, oh gosh, we're excited to work with you, and this is a new idea, and blah, blah, blah. But I got these 2 heavy hits, like, well, you're not going to say something you said before, are you? And you're not going to, this isn't clear enough. And I thought, ew. My first response was, ew, they don't get me. My last publisher, Exchange Press, got me. But this previous publisher with the new people working there don't get me. So I worked it through and I said, you know what? I think we're not a fit. And that was okay with me. And we're still buddies, but it just wasn't a fit. Because what I need as a trauma survivor is to have a publisher who says, we want your unique voice. We want someone who's going to speak her truth. And that's what I've always heard from Exchange Magazine and Exchange Press. Now, I'm working with a different publisher now and different people now. And I told my truth. I've got 3 chapters to write. One of my chapters is about in a book on joy. I mean, Denise, what could a trauma survivor have to say about joy?
A lot.
Yes. Like what?
Like how we denied ourselves it for so long, and how we have to formulate it. We have to recognize it. We have to encourage it to come again.
And actually, I have to believe that I can feel joy. And since we've started these programs, you've been going through that. You used to say, well, I like the idea of joy, but I don't know about it. Then you went to that wonderful party where people were joyous, and it was in large
Yeah,
part
that was a
thanks
good
to you.
joy.
It was a great joy. That's where Denise was at a party
Yeah,
and people were wanting to play, but they were adults and they didn't quite know how to play. So Denise starts getting out your tools, right?
right.
Drums. People were doing drums, but not everybody was comfortable banging on a
Drums
drum.
and bells and scrapers and air guitars, all kinds of stuff.
So it was
Everybody
the
could find something that was somewhat interesting or safe. Some people didn't feel
right.
safe to choose, I noticed.
They
But
couldn't
yeah,
make
once everybody was doing it, it was pure joy.
they couldn't make a joyful noise until they could find themselves feeling safe to express themselves.
Right.
So now here's the pattern thing that I want to go back to. So I had a lot of success writing. And then after my last book came out, it was COVID and I wasn't writing and books anyway. And then I did a book proposal that I just mentioned, and the response was like lukewarm. And I thought, yeah.
Hmm.
And so I let that go, and I just thought we're just not a fit. Because a lot of people these days feel like they know something about trauma, and everybody knows something about trauma. And I feel as a trauma survivor that I know it from the inside out. And that's pretty important. And that's the original voice is the fact that I've been there and I know what it's like. And so when I talk about don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, I can give you endless examples of how that's true for me. And when I talk about trauma survivors being great successes, I can go deeper than that in a heartbeat and say success was based upon my need for perfectionism. Unless I was perfect, I was vulnerable, and being vulnerable was not being safe.
Right.
And so without being safe, I can't do anything. Anyway, so here's the deal. I wrote a chapter on joy and trauma. And my chapter was essentially about number one, the majority of us in early education are trauma survivors. So joy might not be, is not likely to be something that we automatically believe we have a right to. We might want it, but we might not know how to get it because we're so much about being safe and not revealing our vulnerability and taking care of other people. So I describe the process of facing trauma, facing what has happened to my brain. And in the process of facing that, I have come to find joy. For example, I know that when I get scared, and scared means I'm afraid that I'm not safe, that I could get hurt, that I could be shamed, or I could be physically hurt. When I'm afraid, then my voice shuts down, and all I can do is to think of protecting myself. Now I can't be creative at that. So to be a writer, I've got to be creative. So I have chosen over and over again when the feelings of trauma return to say, okay, hello, I know you. I know you, panic attack. You've scared the bejesus out of me for most of my life. You have sent me running for the hills. You have had a lot of control. But now I know that you are simply another way of protecting me from facing what's beneath you. Because what is beneath a panic attack is the sorrow, the loss, the deep sadness that I was abused. And it's easier to run away from that than it is to face it. So during COVID, over and over and over again, I faced the sadness. So there was a change in pattern. If the pattern I had as a trauma survivor, and Denise, I'd like to hear how and in what way this makes sense to you. How, if I kept avoiding situations that might cause me to feel panicky, I kept avoiding tough situations, then that was my answer. And it got bad after a while because I was comfortable out of doors. But when I was in a big city and it was all exhaust fumes and no trees and a lot of high-rise buildings, I could get a panic attack. Because who was I? Where was I? If I couldn't be beside a flower. Am I making sense to you?
Yes.
Can you talk about that? Because I think that would help me and maybe people that are listening.
I've never had a panic attack, but I do know that when I go to nature is when I feel the most safe.
Hmm. So I'm surprised you've never had a panic attack, and maybe we're just defining them differently. Or maybe, I mean, I don't mean to distrust you at all, but for me, a panic attack is when I start feeling anxious about something.
I felt anxious all the time, so it was kind of a natural way or normal or familiar, I guess, for me.
Mhm. Okay, me too. So, because being hypervigilant is just another way of saying being anxious all the time. It's when the anxiety overtakes me. Did you have that happen as a kid when the anxiety overtook you?
I mean, during during abuse,
Mhm.
I would dissociate, but not that I can really put a finger on any specific time of being overwhelmed.
Okay. Well, the
Actually, now I can think of one. When I
okay.
first moved to Arizona and I got on a catering truck, was going to be my roach coach, and it was a new job, and I didn't know my route, and I didn't know how to add up money fast and give change fast, and that was overwhelming. The
That's a
night
lot.
before I started, I was very overwhelmed. And
And
I think, you know, I tried to help myself by driving the route, by practicing with the change machine, you know, the little thing you hook onto your britches.
oh, right. Yeah.
Right. And but I didn't feel underwhelmed or, you know, comfortable until I did it. Like a lot of times I can't really let myself imagine what it's gonna be. I just have to do it.
Mm-hmm. I gotcha.
And once I did it, then I was a, you know, it turned out I got faster and faster at the change machine and remembering the prices and remembering where to go next. I created a routine, which that's what makes me feel happy and comfortable is to actually have a routine.
And you know what I feel is going on listening to you is that if I've got brain pathways that know what to do, then I'm far less anxious. But if I'm creating all of the brain pathways, it's like moving into a new house. And it can be our sleep in a new house can be not as easy as it is in our old place because just to get up at night and use the bathroom, I have to like really be awake so I don't bump into something. It's a different pathway. Brain does not have the pathways yet. So when I go into work with a new group of people, I'm more hyper vigilant because I'm reading everything all the time. You know, who is this
Right.
group? What is their mood? When I go into an old group, I also read what's their mood, but I know who they are and I know how to read them better. But what I'm saying here about fear and panic um, is that in my experience as a trauma survivor, I ran from situations that would put me in such a feeling of fear that I just couldn't bear it. So, for example, and you and I have talked about this as incest survivors. And guys, if you're listening and it's hard to hear about incest, I understand. So I'm going to keep this one pretty boundaried as I talk about it. If I had reason to believe that there was going to be abuse, that was going to be incest happening in the evening, I would try to escape. That was my first thing. How can I get out of here? How can I do something? Can I run next door to the neighbors on an errand? Can I find a way of sleeping over at a friend's house? Can I fall asleep because I work so hard that nobody will even try to wake me up. So I had plans of how I could avoid. That was my first plan. The second plan, and I, of course, didn't articulate this to myself. It's just what I knew to do intuitively, instinctively to survive. The second thing was what you talked about, which avoidance was one, and two, dissociation was the second one. Because if I was trapped and I could not escape my body, you would go to the top of your room and watch because you didn't want to forget. I think I was younger. I was a, toddler, etc. I simply lifted out of my, not simply, I lifted out of my body. I left it behind and I went up through the skies and up and sat on the moon and up and swung on a star and up on my way to the heavens. I don't think I ever made it to the heavens, but I was on my way. So it was avoidance first. And then the second thing was dissociation, which is another way of running away. They're both ways of running away. And as I'm saying this, what's going on with you?
Yeah, I can say that I do even still today practice avoidance of
Mm-hmm.
things that I am not in, that I don't want to do or that I don't, that will give me discomfort.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example that you're willing to talk about?
Um, Not really. I like the gay pride was this weekend
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, and I didn't go because I
Huh.
didn't feel like sitting out in the hot sun and being uncomfortable.
Okay.
So I avoided going,
Could you take
which
an
then
umbrella under the sun?
I could, but my umbrella's broken, and so I didn't want to take it.
Okay.
Um,
Could you
and
sit in the shade?
there is no shade. That's the thing. The place has no shade, and you're
Uh-huh.
not allowed. Like this group that I belong to was planning on taking a tarp that you raise up and everybody could sit under. They wouldn't let you bring those, as it turned out.
Okay.
So that's something that I avoided because I didn't feel like being hot and tired and in the view of all these people.
Mm-hmm. And what did you miss out on?
Well, I saw the post of people there and I was kind of sad that I didn't get to see all the people.
Yeah.
And they didn't get to see me.
Yeah. Girl, lost both ways. Absolutely. Well, avoidance for me is a major strategy as a survivor, not as a person who likes to live my life. But I have been avoiding a lot recently. I have a wonderful opportunity in September to speak with a group, and it's a national group, and they chose me because of me. They want my voice, they want my uniqueness. And I was just supposed to give a keynote, and I said, if you guys need me to do more, I'm going to be there the whole week, so let me know. So they decided that they wanted me to do 1 to 2 breakout sessions. And I said, sure. And that was fine. And it all felt good until I had to, instead of I chose to, write the topic of my keynote and the topic of the 2 breakout sessions, given the theme of the conference. And I had sent them. I mean, I've got lists of topics and descriptions, and they said, these are all good. We love these, but we want you to do something that you think would really be just for this conference. I avoided for weeks. Why? Because I didn't feel in touch with my voice. And worse, more painful than that, I didn't feel I could express my voice. And this is a familiar thing to me. And now let's go back to the patterns. The pattern was, thou shalt not have a voice. Thou shalt not speak. Thou shalt not feel. And since I got that from birth, and maybe even before birth, with all the cortisol zipping through my mother's system
Right.
in the womb, my natural tendency is to like cover up my voice. cover up self-expression. But who I am, I mean, look at this hair. This is all about self-expression. This unique handmade woven huipil is made in way up in the Maya highlands of Guatemala. These earrings, some people think they're Pac-Man earrings. To me, they're lily pads, but I'm expressing myself. My hairstyle is expressing myself. So expressing myself is essential to who I find out I am. As I find out who I am by expressing myself. But it's so two things are painful about that. So I avoid. Number one is the threat of annihilation if I do express my true voice. And the other is the threat of rejection if I express my true voice. And so I can fall back easily on what it was like pre-verbally when I was not allowed to express myself, not even to cry. You want something to cry about? We'll give you something. And I stopped my tears at age 3. And I remember the moment that I did that. I wrote about that in the book because my older sister taught me, kid, stop crying. They won't hit you as hard. They hit me and I'd cry, and they hit me again and I'd cry, and they tell me to stop crying. And, I was like hurting. But when I learned to swallow the tears and send them back down into my belly and my throat, that's when they did hit me less. She was right. This is all sad learning. And how does it add up to my writing? Well, my writing is self-expression. My speaking is self-expression. It's the taboo that I have turned into my profession. And I have several blocks that stop me from expressing myself. And then I get angry at myself. It's the old thing, turn it on ourselves, right? I get frustrated with myself. Or the worst is I say, well, now I've only got one night left to prepare this whole thing. So it's not going to be good enough, but it'll be good enough. And then that forgives my perfectionism. So notice all these pathways I have to as a trauma survivor, I have pattern after pattern to avoid uncomfortable feelings. And yet at the same time, I'm avoiding my true self. Am I making sense? Do you have,
Yeah.
can you talk about that as what you see in that as a trauma survivor's way of living? Or whatever.
Yeah. There's so many things that lead us, so many survival mechanisms that lead us to not being our full self. After one after the other. First, the perfectionism could stop you from writing or speaking. The lack of a voice, but you've practiced your voice a lot, so I think you should be able to muster it up.
I should, and yet as a child, when someone would shame me, I would cover my face like this, cover my head and cover my face, because I didn't want anybody to see me, and I wanted to cover up everything. And when my older sister, 3 years, 2.5 years older, would quiz me on something, she'd tell me about something she was studying in school, like Plato or Socrates, and I would listen. What was I listening to? I was listening to her tell me about herself and what she found fascinating. But when she asked me a question, she quizzed me like a professor. She said, so what did Plato say? So what did Socrates say? And that's not what I was focusing on. If she had asked me, so Holly, what did you notice about why these matter to me? I could have given her pages. Lynn, Socrates matters to you because he's telling you it's okay to express yourself. It's okay to have an individual opinion. But the minute she started shaming me and she like rolling her eyes, like, what's wrong with you, you little kid? You can't memorize Shakespeare. Excuse me, Socrates. I mean, I felt embarrassed about that for years, and that affected my relationship with her for years. Now she's 81, I'm 78. I actually can have a good time with her because I don't any longer need to fit into her expectation of me. And I don't buy her expectation of me. And I have several times confronted the inferiority, the hierarchy that she had over me. I just didn't. If you need it, you got it, but it's not me. I'm not walking into it. I'm not being in that hierarchy. If you need to feel superior to me, it's all about you. It's not about me. So you're right. I express my voice more. But this was tough, Denise, because I started feeling the old sadness, started feeling like these people at this wonderful national organization have chosen me. They could have, the other keynoter they've got is a person who makes tons of money and is apparently really well known in her field of futurism. And anyway, I wouldn't, my natural thing would be not to compare myself to her, but that's what they did. They chose a good person for the beginning and a good person in the end. And they're saying to me, we want you to tell us what you want to talk about. I mean, this is all good stuff, but I start feeling like afraid of expressing myself. And I avoid it. And anyway, here's what happened because it got really tough. And I just was like, my iPhone is my addiction place now. I can do so many zillion things on my iPhone, learn new things, connect with old people. I can go right there and escape. It's another form of escape. But it's also a form of connection. So it's not all bad. But what I finally said, I said, I got to talk with my trauma therapist about this because I can't do this alone. And so I had a real come to Buddha, come to Hillel, come to Jesus, come to Muhammad. I had all of this conversation with him a little over a week ago. And I said, look, I can't do this alone. I can't get out of my fear of expressing myself alone. I can't do it. And as I expressed all of that pattern of not feeling confident in myself, of not feeling like I wasn't going to get wounded again, of not feeling like I wasn't going to get rejected again, because rejection is tantamount to being killed in many ways. It feels like that to a kid. If you don't belong to the family, you ain't got nowhere. You ain't got nobody going to feed you.
Right.
Nobody going to put a roof over your head. There's a price of admission. Anyway, he was very helpful to me. I chose a man because I've had such, the ancestral stuff with men. So I want to find my voice there. And what he said was really simple and very helpful. And I'll see if I can articulate it. He said, and this was back to the theme of how, when I'm getting into an old pattern of surviving rather than an original way of living, what can I do? So he said, Holly, people choose you to be with you as you are. It's to be with you because you create spaces and make it possible for people to be themselves, just themselves with you. And they discover things when they're just being themselves. And so you don't have to have any big theory set. You don't have to have any big new research. You just go in and be with people and be yourself and let them know that you're inviting them to be themselves. And that's holy. And that's, it's not what you say. It's more the co-created space that you have, which is my hope in this program, that you and I just talk, and are the people that come on just talk, and we find a space to tell the truth. And I believe there's nothing more powerful than spontaneous telling of the truth.
The best compliment I've ever gotten from someone was that you are so much yourself that it makes me feel comfortable to be myself. Yeah. And that's what your therapist is saying.
Yes, that's what Ray was saying. That's what he was saying. And so I did that. In fact, the next day I walked in to do a training with a group of educators, early childhood educators. And on my feet, I changed everything because I had the confidence. I had prepared all these slides about the theme is often dealing with people that are difficult for us. Well, what makes them difficult? Well, as trauma survivors, it's being reminded of this guy's going to abuse me, or this person's not going to listen to me, or this person's going to ridicule me, or this person's going to look down on me. And if any of those old hails comes down over my head, I've got to break my way out of it. So I've worked with this group before COVID, for like really for almost 25 years. And what I didn't know is that most of them had retired. So it was like more than 50% of these guys were in their 20s. This is a different group. And I loved them. I went to their classrooms to visit to see what they were doing. And I had great conversations with them. I mean, two of them were one of them was 15, another was 16. She was helping as an assistant for the summer. Okay. So what I got when I got in there was all this stuff I got about narcissism is more beyond, not that they're not ready, but it's not what they need to hear at the beginning of a school year. So on my feet, I switched it up and just came from the heart, came from the soul about what are the essential things we need to do when a parent comes in and starts acting arrogant. What's arrogance about? Well, everybody says, yeah, arrogance is covering up low self-esteem. Okay, so let's look at that. If a parent's treating me like, well, I've got my PhD and you're still in high school, or I am a scientist and you're an early childhood professional, how can I maintain my dignity in the midst of that? And that we could talk about, but I didn't even get into the thing about narcissism because I thought we deal with narcissists after we know how to deal with everyday put downs. The narcissism thing is like the ultimate endless put down. So looking back, I give myself credit for that. It wasn't that I was backpedaling. It was that I said, I'm here to be with these people where they are.
Right.
And this 17-year-old kid who's going off to her private school afterwards, she's going to have parents coming in that are going to look at her like, well, who are you? I'm the adult here. But she knows something. She knows something about child development. She knows something about working with children in a classroom. Yeah. So Denise, I think the question, go ahead. No, what are you thinking as I say all these things?
Uh, yeah, it's a whole new, fresh audience. You can go back to what you gave people before because it was very helpful then, and it will be very helpful again. And it is fresh because you've changed and grown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's maybe a combination of both. When I speak with groups, there are some things, pieces of research that I often go back to because they're helpful. It's helpful. Many times I have said, okay, guys, just inside yourself or with the person next to you, just come up first inside yourself with a percentage. What percentage of us that work with young children are trauma survivors? First, get your own percentage and say it to yourself. And then if you're willing to, turn to the person next to you and share that. And then they start talking, which is really good. Sometimes I have them do it at tables. And inevitably, Denise, people say, it's high. Some people say 100%, 75%. And they're telling the truth. So,
And it really is helpful to have that understanding because I received that information from you as well, which was really eye-opening because, as a people pleaser, we do pay attention to what our coworkers or the teacher next door or whatever, how they react to us. But if you understand that they are abused too, you can muster up a lot more empathy and you can understand why they are protecting themselves or whatever they're doing.
right. That's so true. True. When
So it's not
someone,
like they don't like you or that you're not likable or that you're not even helpful or whatever, any of those feelings that you might get, it's that they're coming from a hurt place. It really helps me to be less judgmental to have that information.
Hmm?
So,
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I could pick up on everything you're saying because hurt people hurt people. So and I just wondered, why do you think survivors of trauma take things so personally, even as adults? Why is it our first response to think it's my fault? It's about me, when the other person might just be having a bad hair day.
right. I think because, right, well, because we process and think so much about what we are feeling and experiencing, we think everybody's doing the same thing, that they're processing, and they're not even really thinking about us. They're thinking about their bad hair day or their, that was something I had to really learn was that they're not even thinking about me. They're thinking about their own business.
And how does that relate to child development? What does a little kid think when something goes wrong? Like the little traumatized kid you had in your classroom, if something went wrong, what would the traumatized child, what were the options that child had?
They're in fear. They're in mostly in fear that it's happening again or it's going to happen again or
Right. So there's something causing harm and it could happen to them and they're not safe. Or in my case, what I always went back to, because I was the bad apple, I was the dark one. I was the one that got stereotyped as the kid that was the troublemaker, the truth teller, which is the same thing as a troublemaker. I learned quickly enough that it was going to be my fault.
right.
If, did you get that too? If they could blame,
No, my sister,
oh,
Debbie,
Debbie,
she was the bad apple. She was the one
that's
causing
right.
problems. Yeah.
Right. And then we get into these boxes. You know, I got into the box of a truth teller, and the truth teller, the good thing about, and I'm going to ask you what box you got into. Because the box I get into was the child who was, because I was the youngest, I could see what my sisters did that and what the consequences were. So I didn't want to do those because I didn't want to be the perfect kid because that was painful. And I didn't want to be the good girl because that was not me. And I didn't want to be the silent one because that was no fun. So I became the truth teller because it's all I knew to do to stay sane in a crazy environment. But boy, have I studied this because in Shakespeare, for example, like I was a literature major, I was trying to understand what happens to the truth teller. Well, the truth teller is often the fool. Shakespeare had these fools, and the fools would be around the leaders to distract them from getting too violent and to help them ease up with humor. But the fools were also the ones that were the wise ones that could be killed for telling the truth. If the fool told the truth, off with his head, get out of here. And so the fool was having to constantly go back and forth between being sort of making a fool of himself so he wouldn't be a threat, and it was all he's, and being able to tell the truth in a way that the king could hear it. And I noticed my son, who's neurodiverse, that his whole life, he has done a Shakespearean thing, which is kind of gibberish, hey, nani, nani, hey, nani, no, hey, nani, no. When he was a little guy, he used to go, chicka, chicka, choo, choo, chicka, chicka, choo, with the train tracks, chicka, chicka, choo, choo, chicka, chicka, choo. And I realized what he was doing was making a song in his own head that made sense to him. And if other people were shaming him or trying to shame him, or they were saying things to him that he didn't want to hear, he couldn't do that, but he could sing or chicka chicka to himself. And I realized That is a defense that trauma survivors have. We get this pattern in our own heads that we can return to. You got the pattern in your head that if you went up to the ceiling, you could look down on what was happening, so you would promise yourself you wouldn't forget it. You didn't have to be the victim, right?
Right.
And my son Nick, when he was different than all those other kids in school, he could start doing chicka chicka choo choo chicka chicka choo, and the teacher would think he was happy. But what he was doing was keeping people away from him. He didn't know the answer to a question, or he didn't have words. Chicka chicka choo choo chicka chicka choo. He can still do it today at age 40 in a different way. He'll repeat things or he'll do gibberish, and that's when I know he's telling me, I don't want to be questioned. I don't want to have to tell unless I'm ready. And Denise, I think it's the same thing. And we probably got about 5 minutes left here. It's the same thing with me as a trauma survivor. I have these patterns to protect myself from rejection and pain because the pain of rejection is too great. So that rather than tell myself, yeah, this national group of Indigenous people, they want me to speak and they want me to speak from my heart. And how can I accept that when it's easier for me to accept that I'm not good enough? That publisher's right. I'm not making sense. It's the self-abuse that is, why is self-abuse so easy for us to go back to?
We took it on as survivors, well, as abuse receivers, that it was our fault. We don't unlove our parents for abusing us. We unlove ourselves.
Right. See, that's, I don't know if you've seen that. That's a graphic that I sent around a lot that says if you yell at your child and say horrible things to your child won't stop loving you. It's what you just said. Your child will no longer love herself.
Right.
And I also think
that's one of the patterns that we take on because we weren't able to develop good coping skills because we were put in situations that were not learning and growing, but harmful.
And I also think it fills a bigger systemic purpose. If I, as a girl child, learned to shut up, blame myself, people please, try to fix the problem, and anytime a problem came up, not rock the boat because I knew I was going to get in trouble for it, I become a very compliant, obedient, easy child. But that's not a child who learns who she is.
Right. And so the box that I went into was helper.
Yep.
I can help somebody, and then the spotlight's off me, or not challenged. I'm being helpful.
Mm-hmm. And there's always, you'll get to survive because people will need you.
Right.
Denise as a child could make all the signs. You could count on her for that, and she did really well. Holly as a child could cheer everybody up. She did that well. You could count on her. Denise as an adult would go in there and work with the most difficult of children. Holly as an adult would take on the taboos that nobody else is talking about and make it a safe place for people to talk about the taboos until we decided that we don't want Denise to go too far. Some of these kids are getting too uppity, or we don't want Holly to go too far. Some of these people are now talking about the fact that they were incest survivors, and we don't want to hear that. We don't want to know that. We don't want to know that 1 out of every 3 girls in America has been molested. And we watched that convention, and that convention had that young woman who was a 12-year-old girl. Did you see her? She said, one of the candidates is saying that to be pregnant is a beautiful thing. I was 12 years old and I was raped by my stepfather. How is that beautiful?
Right.
That's a truth that people don't want to hear. And it's easier than to go into denial, avoidance. And the other thing is, what's the word? Well, dissociation. But Denise, I'm trying to say here is we get in these systems where people pretend, like they lie. They pretend nothing ever happened. I will always remember an article I read in New Yorker about what happened in Germany after the war was so painful for people to remember, not just Germans who had lost their own families, but Germans because they had cooperated with the Nazis because they didn't have a choice, but they did. The German word was fog. Fog went into everybody's brains, and no one would talk about what happened. And if anybody started talking about it, boy, that person would be rejected. And I met a woman, an early childhood woman from Germany, who said, "Oh boy, I had a friend that did that. She went back to Germany to study. What happened?" And no one would let her into the community. No one would let her in. So what we are doing is dangerous in a way, and we can be the scapegoats. And although we learn ways to keep under the radar, this program is not staying under the radar. Sometimes it's safe when I think, I don't know who's listening to this, and we're just telling the truth. And as a lawyer, I know I'm not saying anything that would put us into liability. But I also know as a lawyer that anybody can sue anybody for anything, and that's a way of delaying everything. So we need to wrap up. And so what would you, to look back, what either was powerful for you about our time together today, what spoke to you, or what's your take on it?
We have to keep working towards healing. And, that's why I come here every week, because then I know I'm putting effort to being more honest, more authentic, and healed.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's right. I have this conviction inside of myself. I believe it in my heart and in my soul that by telling my truth and not covering it up anymore or making it pretty, pretending that it's not there, telling the things that are most painful, like how I can look down on myself and get caught up in my own sense of inadequacy, that heals me. And it did. When I said that to Ray, I got this whole other feeling. And the other feeling was, Holly Elissa, it's not so much the books full of information you have, it's the authenticity and the honesty of telling the truth without hurting people. Telling the truth so that we can all find our way and walk each other home.